Hello, it's Brad Laurie of BlockchainBrad, and today we're speaking about all things Ocean Protocol. To do that, we have two co-founders in the hot seat today. We have both Trent and Bruce here to really clarify and explain everything about Ocean. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much.
Likewise, obviously, it's a privilege to be able to speak with two co-founders of Ocean Protocol. This is the best way that you can get informed information, informed data about this protocol and what they stand for. For disclosures, this is entirely free. This is all about providing the public with information that is all about, once again, trying to explain what a startup stands for and what they plan to do, and it's not conditioned by any sponsorship of any kind. So gentlemen, let's get stuck into that. Firstly, the statements that we see in your literature on your websites, trying to explain what you stand for in a nutshell. It says that you're essentially a complex decentralized data protocol, network, marketplace. Three really important terms that encapsulate your value. Would you like to extrapolate on that a little bit so we can have a better understanding of what Ocean Protocol fundamentally is?
Yeah, so for Ocean, I think it's all about giving people more power in a data economy. The world is heading towards more digital products. It's heading to a place where a lot of data is being captured, and most of that data is not being monetized. And our vision is that the data is owned by the data owners, whether individuals or enterprises, and then there becomes a fluid and liquid market for the buying and selling of those data, as well as AI services, so that the playing field gets leveled for everyone, and not just the large companies like Google, Facebook, and Amazon.
Mm-hmm. And obviously that's sort of music to many people's ears in the millennial sort of area, because we want to change the narrative. We want data to be of value for more people in a more democratic sense. Trent, I wanted to ask you, in the context that Bruce is talking about, can you explain a bit more about how you do unlock the data, though, especially in the context of AI?
Absolutely, yes. So Ocean is designed to unlock data in three ways. One of them is to make it really easy to build marketplaces and commons. So in this way, there can be dozens, hundreds of marketplaces that are selling the data with focusing on different verticals, et cetera. Yet at the same time, those marketplaces are not controlling the data. That is still in the control of the people who own the data. That's the first. The second way is by making it where people can, and it actually loops to the first, it's bringing compute to the data. So if I have data that I want to monetize or share with others, rather than them having to download that data, what if all they really want the data for is to build an AI model or to do some analytics of some form? They can have that compute running locally. So I hold my data. I get the benefit of selling the data to others, but at the end of the day, the compute is running side by side with the data. So it's sort of, you can have your cake and eat it too. Mm-hmm. And the third way to unlock data is by using network rewards to reward people who supply data to the commons. So just like Bitcoin network gives Bitcoin tokens to people who add to the security of the Bitcoin network, and security defined by hash rate according to the Bitcoin network. In Ocean network gives network rewards to people who supply data to the network in a commons fashion.
Right,
so
and in that sense,
just a challenge of.
Sorry, just to jump in there, Trent, that it also explains, and we're going to talk about the metrics later, but that would explain why you have such a significant amount of tokens in your supply, not so much just now, but in the future, there's a substantial amount in your increasing supply as you move forward. Is that also because of this inbuilt incentivization and reward system?
It's exactly that, yes. The majority of our tokens are dedicated to this third way of unlocking, which is basically essentially people doing work in the network to supply data to others. So yes.
Right, okay. Now, gentlemen, one of the things that's fundamental to understand your startup is to understand the problem that precedes it. Now, either of you, could you comment on, with regard to data, what the core problems were that you foresaw perhaps when you started this initiative?
Maybe I'll start with this from my perspective. So I spent about 20 years in the world of AI beforehand, and going back to the late 90s, working for national defense, and then on the heels of that, in the world of computer chip design. And initially, if you want to do AI research, develop new AI algorithms to sort of make an accurate classifier or regression, basically models, you would basically spend 1 year, 3 years, do a PhD, whatever, to try to develop these models. But what people discovered was, instead of doing all that research, just have more data, have not just 2x more data, but 10x, 100x, 1000x more data. And the error rates can go from 40% to 20 to 10 to 5 to 1 to 0.1%. And this makes all the difference in the world. So more data means more accurate AI models, to the point where these models can be deployed into production. And this was kind of a realization in about the mid-2000s by the AI community. And since then, companies that really got this started doubling down on trying to get more and more and more data. But we've ended up at this time now where those companies that really have lots of data and lots of AI expertise, there's just a handful of them, and they become incredibly powerful.
Right.
The Facebooks and Googles of the world.
Right.
And
I
that's
did read
how it links. Yeah.
I read into the literature that you have, and it was very clear that there is only that handful as well, Trent. But how do we also ensure the quality of the data as well? Because it's one thing to be able to access significant amounts of data, but to also have quality of data and trusted data.
Yes. So within Ocean, we have the key value that we think things can't be censored, so censorship resistance. So we need to square with that, right? So we can't have things like some expert committee that says this is quality data and this isn't. And we looked around at different ways to sort of assess, should we use information criteria and things like AIC or MDL, et cetera. And what we realized was the best thing is an economic signal. People treat data as quality if they download it, if they use it, if they pay for it, et cetera. So with that, within Notion, we have it where if you think data is of quality, then you will stake on it. And that's towards your future expectation of people downloading it, et cetera, or buying it, right? So that's really the common side. And then on the buying side, if you're not selling quality data, then people won't be paying for it.
That's an interesting point. So it's socially determined essentially what the degree of quality is. Now, what about you, Bruce? Obviously, you come with your own experience and your background is extensive as well. What's your viewpoint in why this needs to exist, why we need to have this decentralized data solution?
I think the main thing is that, given all the hacks that have happened around the world, I think there's nobody in the world who has not been a victim of a hack. You see that anybody who has kind of centralized data repositories are at risk of being a honeypot. At the same time, you have these movements like GDPR where governments are trying to give people back control over their data. And it's at the confluence of these two kind of tensions where we saw, along with working in the past in BigChainDB by building decentralized database, that there was a strong need to give people kind of an awareness as well as control and a way to monetize what is rightfully theirs. So as soon as, for instance, you put some data into Facebook or Google or what have you, you lose complete transparency about how it's being used, how they're reselling it to advertisers, et cetera, and you have no transparency. With Ocean, you have the vision and the capability in the future to see who has access to your data. You can control under what conditions it gets shared, and you can also put a price on it.
Right.
I think that's something that can appeal to anybody.
Right, and also we're going to talk about your pricing model because that's one part of your whole ecosystem that is very transparent and is very planned. But gentlemen, I did want to touch on something that Bruce is alluding to, and that is things like Cambridge Analytica. I mean, arguably this couldn't have come at a better time, your platform, your protocol rather, given all of the problems that we see inherent with centralized data control.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're coming up to a wave, pardon the pun, a wave of awareness from the community and the world that systems that use us as the product, any free product means that you're the product, this type of thing. These systems are unsustainable. There was a tweet, I forget from who it came from. It said, data is not the new oil, data is uranium. And what that means is that only the people who have extremely high security and trust should be handling this stuff. Otherwise, it should be in the hands of the people who truly control it. And I think that is something that is important and what Ocean kind of pushes towards, that if you hold data, you better have a very good reason to have it. Otherwise, make sure that the true rightful owner has complete transparency and control over it.
It's a very good point, and also it just shows the value of data itself in the modern era as well. Many people don't realize just how valuable data actually is. Now, with regard to some of the core components, gentlemen, that's also very important, understanding the fundamentals, understanding the technology. In a nutshell, maybe we could start with you, Trent. How would you describe the essential components? You know, because you talk about breaking down those data silos, but how do you do that, and with what key features?
Absolutely. So at the very, very heart of Ocean is decentralized orchestration. Now, what does that mean? It basically means allowing these AI compute pipelines or general compute pipelines to happen where the step 1, step 2, step 3 is all orchestrated in this decentralized fashion. So for example, Ocean oversees grabbing a data set, say from Amazon storage, say S3, cleaning that data set, say with Amazon EC2 compute, maybe storing it again using some decentralized storage, say Filecoin when it comes out, and then training a data like an AI model, say using a decentralized solution, say Fetch AI or SingularityNet, et cetera, et cetera. So Ocean is orchestrating all these steps, step 1, step 2, step 3. And that's really the heart of it. Now, a big subset of that is access control. So Ocean has a rich way to do permissioning where I can choose who can access what data when, right? So that's the very heart. And then on top of it, it has these layers on top to make it easy to do things like build data marketplaces, build data commons, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. I've read into the tiers. It's quite comprehensive, and we can always do another interview and really build upon this and explore those tiers separately. But also with regard to your orchestration model, I wanted to ask you about the DAG because it's referenced, and I wanted to try and better understand what that means in the context of Ocean.
Yeah, so when I say AI compute pipeline, that's basically a chain, right? Step 1, step 2, step 3. But of course, you don't have to have just a chain. You can actually have tasks that are branching off in parallel, which takes you from a chain to a DAG then, right? A directed acyclic graph. Right. So it's really about that. But Ocean itself is actually built in Solidity, that running on EVM, and in the interest of performance, our users are data scientists, et cetera. They will not be happy with the performance of things like the Ethereum mainnet. So we have deployed our own federated network, PoE style network.
Right,
so
and how's the roadmap? How's the roadmap with regard to starting utilising the EVM and then obviously progressing forward into your own robust network so that it's operational regardless of EVM?
Yes, so we have 5 parts in our roadmap. Part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Part 1 and 2 and 3 are 3 ways to unlock data. Part 4 and 5 are towards the community and full decentralization. So we have shipped V1 in beta, basically, which is having the core access control as well as making it easy to build marketplaces, et cetera. That is already running on an Ocean dedicated PoE network that runs EVM. We are working on V2 and V3, and then V4, V5 include things like permissionless, fully permissionless. So that's part of the overall goal and vision. And finally, there are starting to get technologies out there that are both permissionless and having decent performance.
Right, and Bruce, I want to go to you for a moment. There's so much in Trent's comments. Firstly, I wanted to ask you about that interplay between permissioned and permissionless systems, and what your plan is for the future. Obviously, business is part of your roadmap, and thus permissioned is highly relevant. But also in doing this tiered system and this tiered approach, you've also built in agreements, as I understand, in conjunction with the orchestration model. So can you talk us through the importance of those I'm not sure of the term, I can't remember, but there were special agreements that help through the steps of the DAG process. And then also from there, can you talk about, how you're planning to build out the permission and permissionless system?
Sure. So I think from just a conceptual perspective, ideally in these types of networks, particularly in Ocean, but in other networks like Bitcoin as well, you have different layers of kind of actors working with the network. So for instance, in Bitcoin, you have the miners who operate the nodes. You have people who are exchange, which are on-ramps. You have, the core developers and stuff like that. And for Ocean, the main thing that we want to kind of have is that at each of those layers, it is as decentralized as possible, where the incentives as well as the design of that strata is tending towards kind of a disbursement of power, so that at no single layer you have one single kind of entity or actor in control.
Mm-hmm.
We see this, for instance, in Bitcoin, where you have, like, let's say 6 developers running it, checking code before it goes in. You have whatever 10,000 node operators. You have X number of exchanges, all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so for permission and permissionless, it's more nuanced in the sense, because right now for Ocean, what we're designing it for is so that on each layer where there can be kind of user interaction or value, that it can be as permissionless as possible. Now, when you get up to the layer of what we call L3, which is the application layer, that's where you're going to have marketplaces that are branded, health data, supply chain data, IoT data. And that's where you could have some aspects of centralization, because a brand is powerful. So if you have, let's say, IoT marketplace, maybe from, let's say, IOTA, it could be something that is gaining market share and mind share, where it becomes kind of an area of centralized control. Right. However, because the stack below that is fully decentralized, if I'm a data provider and, for instance, the IOTA marketplace is not playing fair, I could just take my inventory off the IOTA marketplace and put it onto a different marketplace, because at the lower levels, I have full control over it. Mm-hmm. So for me, that's the most important kind of aspect of Ocean and this whole movement of decentralization, is that people can control their content and their property at a lower level and not be dependent on centralized sources to market and manage their information.
Right. So at the very fundamental, at that base layer, is decentralized by core design. And I think, your explanation of this and also the considerations you've made in designing this and building the architecture is about changing the narrative, so that essentially the data is first and foremost decentralized from the outset. Now, with regard to some of the other things, I wanted to talk to you, Trent, about some of the claims with regard to privacy and also with regard to data sharing as well. They're two terms that come up a lot. Can you talk us through those with regard to the value that that Ocean brings?
Absolutely. So privacy, of course, goes hand in hand with GDPR, the European data regulations. And a core tenet that we had from the very beginning was to make sure that no potentially personally identifiable information could be on-chain. So the part that is on-chain is really the handshaking for the permissions, right? This person can share with this person and so on. Mm. And so then, as Bruce was mentioning, the data itself is stored by the people that are selling it or sharing it. And then the other part about the data is the metadata, right? And this metadata, crucially, also is not on-chain, because metadata itself could have PII, right? Could have personally identifiable information. So that is actually stored by the people running the different commons marketplaces or price data marketplaces and so on. So maybe by analogy, Ocean has an architecture a lot like the DNS, where the DNS has 2 layers. The core layer is a simple, thin database that is a mapping from domain names to IP addresses, like say Amazon.com to 12.345.56, etc. Mm-hmm. And then one level above, you have these different marketplaces buying and selling domain data, like Gandhi.net, GoDaddy, etc. Ocean is similar. So we've got this very, very thin blockchain that has the handshaking. And then one level above, people can be building these marketplaces, and the marketplaces themselves are storing the metadata appropriately. And so they have to account for proper privacy controls of the metadata. They themselves, though, crucially, do not control the core data blobs, et cetera, that are being bought and sold. So that's basically how we reconcile, how we thread the needle of privacy and blockchain. And the end result is that the people with the data themselves that are selling it, et cetera, they control it all, basically. And Ocean is not exposed, does not expose any PII, and the marketplaces themselves have just enough data to ensure very good searchability, discoverability of data.
Right, and obviously marketplace is something we will talk about more, because that's a key value prop for the protocol. Now, Bruce, in that context, can you just clarify for us whether or not you're an agnostic protocol? Because that's something that I think needs to be, explored upon more, because the EVM is something that Trent has mentioned before, but I'm assuming that you can also work with other blockchains and the other VMs as well.
Yeah, Ocean is agnostic. You could have Ocean networks running privately using the Ocean core code, just like with Ethereum, or you can use a public Ocean network. The public Ocean network itself could also be implemented with other chains. And then you can use something like token bridges, excuse me, to have value exchange with Ocean tokens across those bridges into these other networks. So that's something we're really excited for. I think the main kind of facet here is that blockchain is a team sport, whether it's within the protocol or with the other protocols that are emerging in the world. And technology is moving so fast that it would be not selfish, that's the wrong word, but it would be kind of blind if we didn't expect for other projects and technologies to be moving forward in other areas that we're not as we're not focusing on, and to leverage those strengths. So right. I think Trent can talk about a couple of them where we've been leveraging some of the strengths of other networks.
That would be great. And also, Trent, on that note, when we talk about that in a moment, can you let us know a bit about the acronyms? For example, we hear of SaaS models and we hear of BPaaS, and even one I was thinking of when I was reading into today, whether it be a protocol as a service. Can you talk to us about that in the context of potentially valuable layer one blockchains?
Sure. So overall, to sort of double down on what Bruce mentioned, so these DAGs that manifest a decentralized orchestration or an AI compute pipeline, you know, I talked about grabbing data from some service and then doing compute on some service. Those services can be behind firewalls in enterprises or on people's phones. They can be Web 2 services, they can be Web 3 services, right? So I had mentioned before, you know, examples of Web 2 data like Amazon S3, or Web 3 data like Filecoin or storage or whatever. And then also same thing for compute. Web 2 compute like Amazon EC2, Web 3 compute that is general like Golem or iExec, or specific to particular things like privacy preserving, like Enigma, or AI focused like we have with SingularityNet and so on. So Ocean is designed at its very heart to play well with all of these because it's drawing on each of those services, right? Or it will be in the design. So this is, you know, of course, one step at a time with a roadmap. Ocean already has the bones for this. It has the access control. But the V2 that we're working on right now includes pulling in these services to really support these pipelines of step 1, step 2, step 3. Right now it has support for more just pure storage services. So
it's fascinating because
and then
it also
on the acronyms then.
Well, it correlates also, Trent, with all of the list of partners that you have. So clearly, right from the outset, you've thought about those parties that can collaborate and reciprocally work with you, so that there's some mutual benefits for both parties in real value for the future of Web3 even. Absolutely,
yeah. So most of the players in Web3 are very natural as partners for, you know, these services, supplying data or storage services, supplying compute. It also makes us well suited towards others doing data marketplaces, because those marketplaces can increase their distribution by also supplying their data through Ocean, and then vice versa. Ocean can help them in terms of data itself, so they can be taking Ocean data and sell that through their channels as well. So it's a win-win and benefiting with the benefits of Ocean, such as bringing compute to the data.
Right.
So yeah, it's natural, fits across the
And so in that context of acronyms, as we were talking about before, how would you sort of ascribe a terminological explanation for the protocol of Ocean in the context of what we've known as layer 1, layer 2, for example?
Right. So overall, you know, all sort of blockchains in a sense, like they have APIs that are, you know, Solidity interfaces or REST interfaces that sit on top and define basically more generally. A protocol is simply a set of specifications about how one machine talks to another, right? So in that sense, Ocean is very much a protocol already, and with REST APIs, etc. on top, Java interface, JavaScript, Python. So you know, you can frame it as, if you want, software as a service, but that is a very Web 2 term, and of course you can do that for, you know, what Ocean is exposing. And you know, there are people framing blockchains as platform as a service and all that. That's fine. You know, people can use whatever models they want to sort of fit into the context that they understand. We see that Ocean is really this ultimately this technology to unlock data, which has sort of a service-oriented way to consume it, right?
Right, and I'm glad we're talking about this, Trent, because quite sincerely, what you've shown in your response now is it is slightly different to that typical sort of vertical that we treat many of them in, and we try to box them into those layers. Really, because of the repleteness and because of the sophistication of what I've read into, at least with Ocean, it is slightly different in that it is a robust architecture of its own.
Yeah, it is, but we also are going way out of our way to reuse all the other great building blocks that have been emerging in the Web 2 and the Web 3 ecosystem and whatnot, right? And, you know, in Web 2 even, or in the big data ecosystem, there are things like Kubernetes and Docker that have become very important. So we happily use those tools as well, right? I should mention, though, if you're a developer looking to use Ocean, then we have very straightforward to use libraries, right? Such as SquidPy, SquidJS, that you know, in just a handful of lines of code, you can start using Ocean immediately. And we have nice onboarding for those too. And
how generic is those kinds of code? Because obviously you mentioned Solidity, and that requires a little bit of knowledge of firstly that, and also Ethereum with its unique programming language. So how accessible have you made this to, you know, developers worldwide?
Yeah, so Squid JS and SquidPy, etc. You can view these as essentially SDKs, one level above, right, in JavaScript, Python, etc. So if you're using those and the off-the-shelf templates for orchestration that we provide, then you don't need to interact with Solidity at all, right? If you want, you can go to one level deeper and interact in much more detail if you want. But at one level higher, you don't have to. So even if you're, you know, a developer only used to Web 2 and doing a lot on, say, the JavaScript stack with Node.js and so on, then you can use Ocean out of the box. But if you choose, you know, if you really want to get deeper and spend a lot of time in Solidity, etc., that's completely okay.
Well, that's good to know. And Bruce, I wanted to ask you also with regard to code access, the state of the GitHub itself. I mean, how authentically open source is the technology so far?
Yeah, so absolutely. So, you know, all of our repos, I haven't pulled that up, but all of our repos that we're building on are public. And we think that the community should be inspecting this and taking a look at what we are publishing. Yeah, there are some repos that we are still in development that we have kept closed just to make sure that we understand the kind of the process and how to do it before we publish it.
Right. Okay. Now, with regard to, I was referencing something before, I couldn't quite remember, but I've written it down in my notes. Trent, with regard, you have a thing called the Service Execution Agreement. It seemed to me it was very important to your overall design. So can you just talk a bit more about the value of that agreement and what it actually does?
Yes, in fact, the C, Service Execution Agreement, is how you describe one of these compute pipelines, one of these compute DAGs. So it's just a sort of a protocol by which you specify do this, then this, then this, right? Right now, what is shipping in Ocean is really about access control, especially around data sets. We have templates for these Cs that are really easy to use from within the higher level SDK, you know, SquidPy, SquidJS, et cetera, right? And then as we're building V2 right now, then we are creating new template service execution agreements, Cs, for these compute pipelines that have, you know, grab from a data service, then do some compute, then store again, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these Cs are really how you specify these pipelines, and that is exactly, like you said, at the very heart of Ocean.
Right. Now, in context, gentlemen, if you could give us some examples of applications, you know, with regard to uptake of the Cs, whether that be from enterprise or other sectors, just so we understand that this is not just a narrative, this is not just a white paper, but it's something more.
Sure, I can start with that. So we do have some engagements, some we've announced, some we haven't announced, and it mainly goes around connecting two entities that want to share data, whether it's in their own kind of private sharing or looking forward to something future. And so what people have done is they've created this kind of a bilateral connection, and they're using the SCs to just track provenance of data sharing. So for instance, right now, let's say for health, if somebody wants to make sure that this data was actually transferred, you can use the Cs along with the Ocean network to record that this data did pass over at this time under these conditions. And so that's kind of like the archetype of the use case that we're working on right now. There's other use cases that we're working on that are closer to bringing compute to data, but those we kind of want to save those up for announcements later on. Okay, well,
I'll let you get away with that part, but I do want to understand a bit more about some of the verticals. Let's open up this discussion, because if we can't discuss the real value of this in the real world, then really it's going to be difficult for people to understand Ocean itself. So without giving names away, can you talk to us more about key verticals. You mentioned medical as one, so that we can understand essentially how vast the scope is for ocean in the future.
So we think there's a need for.
Go ahead, Bruce.
So yeah, thank you. So we think there's a need for a general purpose data and AI services sharing protocol. So that's the market opportunity. It's in my mind quite unlimited. Like we have a long way to go before this type of opportunity is tapped out.
Right.
We have been working in healthcare, retail, automotive, as well as industrial kind of areas right now in the last, since we started in mid-2017, and we've been gradually getting, as the technology matures, going into these and learning more and more. So for instance, what we have published is, we are one of the founding members of MOBI, which is an automotive consortium. Within that automotive consortium are automakers that represent, I forget what percentage of the global production, but it's a significant amount.
Yeah.
And then we're quite active there. And then in healthcare, if I had to actually say it, I think that's where most of our inquiries come from, is the healthcare sector, where it's obvious, people want to share research. People are wanting to work with other companies to get better data and advance faster with products and services. But given the sensitivity around private data, genetic data, and health data, nobody knows how to do it. And so many of our use cases that people are coming up to us with relate to healthcare, because if you solve healthcare, you pretty much solve a whole bunch of problems that affect most of the other sectors. So if you can solve sharing data privately, safely, and securely, that applies very cleanly to financial services. So if I'm a hedge fund, if I run a hedge fund and I want certain data and I want to know that I'm the only one accessing it, you can use the same types of solutions that we have for other sectors and apply it into financial services. So financial data is a huge one, by the way. I could go on, actually.
Right.
Did you want to step in?
Yeah, please do so.
Yeah, sure. So we actually can be much more specific than what we've been listing so far. So, some of the organizations that we're working with in various capacities include Roche, Johnson & Johnson, Unilever, the government of Singapore, Connected Life, AIX Prize, and many more. They're actually listed on our website for anyone to look. And for each of the ones that I mentioned, we usually have at least 1 or 2 blog posts describing exactly the engagement. To be more specific on 2 of the verticals that we've spent a fair bit of time, as Bruce alluded, on healthcare and on mobility. Healthcare, imagine if you can build an AI model. Imagine if you can build an AI model that is across 1 billion people, right? Where it's super accurate. Because right now, if you're building a model to say predict Parkinson's, then you might have 1 hospital or maybe 5, and so you've got 1,000, 10,000 people, and so that's going to be a certain level of accuracy, say maybe 10% error. But if you can actually build across way more, then your error rate goes down to 1%, 0.1%, etc. Right? And this might be possible if you can get data across many hospitals. Of course, if you were to pool that data in the traditional way across many hospitals, then it would be a privacy nightmare. So
Right.
Imagine though that you could have the benefit of pooling all the data, a model that is essentially pooled across all of these in terms of its learning, without that data ever leaving those silos, and even the orchestration to build that model is decentralized. And this is what Ocean promises, right?
And that's what's fascinating
example,
about the permissioned aspect built into the permissionless system as well, Trent, because you're catering for the needs of various privacy needy entities when we're talking about healthcare, for example, and you're trying to also facilitate a more global system that is Ocean. So in the context of today, how are the discussions and the deliberations going with these parties you mentioned? They are on the website, so that they can understand what you do and how far ahead are you in the roadmap with them to collaborate?
Yeah, so for each of these different ones, it's at various stages and whatnot, but we have ongoing engagements with several entities, and we will announce those once we get further along. We prefer to make our announcements, only to announce more once we have progress of XYZ, right? Like where there's real meat on the bone.
FOMO prior to things being really properly done, it only, I would argue, does damage to the whole system that is, crypto and blockchain, because a lot of speculation then comes in. So I really respect that you're not doing it until they really happen in real time. Now, gentlemen, with regard to essentially AI for a moment, I want to talk about some statements that you've made in your literature to better understand just how valuable it is. Now, it says here that AI advances 6 times more when data is available. I wanted to try and understand what you mean by that. What does it mean to have data connected to AI in the context of what you're trying to do? And how do you essentially then make AI so much more valuable in that respect?
Yeah, so I guess I'd summarized a bit this before, but the quick summary is AI needs data in order to build these models for classification regression. For example, credit card detection. If you've got a really bad credit card fraud detection, if you've got a really bad AI model, then someone coming in, who applies for a credit card, are they going to be able to pay their bills or not, right? And if you've got a bad AI model, then you won't have any real idea to assess whether they're good or they're bad, right? Mm-hmm. And so, but you want to have as accurate a model as possible to then choose whether they're worthy to have. And so the more data, the better. And to quote a famous paper from the mid-2000s, data is unreasonably effective, right? And right. So, and that's really the heart of it, right? So accurate AI models need lots of data, want more and more and more data, not just 2x, but 10x or 1000x more. That's really the heart of what Ocean is about. Yeah.
Right. Now, Bruce, I want to talk to you a bit more about the blockchain in the context of some things we've been talking about in terms of redeemability, rewards and incentives. The blockchain is perfect for that scenario. Can you talk us through more of that? Because obviously, as Trent explained, the token supply is very, very large, as we move on in the decades to come. So what's the plan to incentivize the participants, the consumers and users of the ecosystem?
Actually, I'm going to hand this over to Trent. He's the one who's been working on this more than I am.
Right, okay.
Sure, my pleasure. Yeah, so overall, even from day one when we were working on Ocean, we saw that there's a lot of value to having data marketplaces for buying and selling price data. But then there's a yin to the yang, which is commons data. And we saw, there's actually lots of organizations putting data out there in the open, but it's all basically siloed. There are more than 200 independent organizations out there that are saying, hey, here's our data set, come use it, right? Mm. And at the same time, they just put it out there with the APIs, and sometimes it gathers dust, right? So what if there could be some sort of unified way to gather this all together via a unified API where that data doesn't need to get moved? It's just there, and people are incentivized to share it, to spread the word, and so on. And this is really what we're trying to do with the Ocean incentives. So the heart of the incentive system is the goal, the thing we're optimizing for is maximize the supply of relevant data. And this has an emphasis on commons data. So the network basically pays you in Ocean tokens if you stake on data and then supply it as asked. So, and the more you stake, the more you expect on average to get paid. That's really what it's about. And this is part of our V3, which we're working towards building and shipping.
Right, I did look at the roadmap and I noticed that there is a need for some more updates in both, I think, Q3 and Q4. I wanted to ask both of you gentlemen about some criticisms of staking, actually, where some have suggested that it's a means of just simply changing the circulating supply. Could you clarify a bit more about why it's so valuable to add staking and embed that into your system longitudinally, given that there is so much controversy about staking today and how essentially some are arguing that it really just helps with attracting more users into the ecosystem because of the token value itself?
So I can comment. So how we approach the design of Ocean overall is very much the way that an electrical engineer would design the approach of an electrical circuit, which is a very thorough methodology. At the heart of what we're trying to do, we're designing these dynamical systems, and there's input flow of tokens, output flow, and so on. And you want to have sinks, like things like batteries and so on in electrical terms. So as we were designing the Ocean token, we wanted to make sure that it had these dynamics, that it had people supplying data. And so what fell out of that, supplying data subject to several constraints that we laid out. There's about a dozen that we've documented. Things like, prevent spam, and people who really believe, like a signal for curation. If people really believe in the value of a data set, they need to signal in some authentic way, and so for that, staking is a key part there. So overall, we had approached this designing the token from a pure engineering perspective. We actually called it token engineering, and in a fun way that really took off. So but with our background as engineers, this is how we approach the design, rather than saying, okay, it needs to, it's something directly related to some hype in the crypto market. That's not how we approach things. We really approach it from a pure engineering perspective.
Right, and that's exactly what I want to know, Trent, because obviously there are those who come from an economics standpoint when they try and do token economic modeling, and you're saying it's coming from a very engineering sort of centric position. So I appreciate that, and hopefully we'll talk a bit more about the token model later. But with regard to the marketplace itself, Bruce, I want to talk to you about that. Just give us a bit of a rundown on the marketplace scenario now, because obviously the participation, the natural flow of the marketplace is the fundamental asset of the protocol itself. How's that going? How is the marketplace building for both now and the future?
We released a reference marketplace, which is for commons data, so free data. And what we've now had, and I think it's public in our GitHub, is kind of a setting where people can start publishing and pricing data. So with this type of toolkit, anybody can come in, take the Ocean reference marketplace, and start then using the components underneath and then selling data if they want to. Now that's a big wheel that we have to get going, but that's kind of the capability. Now once we've kind of refined the pricing side, there's also a need for kind of data management. So once people are publishing data, they want to actually see how that data is being consumed, who's consuming it, all that sort of stuff, and that's more of a data management platform. So that's something that we think is the next logical step to build into a marketplace. So those are kind of the building blocks. And then with those building blocks, now for us, we're ramping up business development activities to go to prospective startups, small, medium size, as well as large enterprises, to see where they have the need for releasing and unlocking their data, and whether or not the marketplace toolkits is suitable for that to use on Ocean. So there's already a need for people to have provenance of where data is going and how it's being shared. People are wanting to have a price signal on their data, but they don't know how to share to get that initial liquidity going. So these are all the 0 to 1 challenges that we're working on right now. And I think there's a whole bunch of other teams in the space trying to get that wheel turning, and this is one of the big challenges. If we get this going, if we start getting marketplaces moving using the Ocean protocol, then for me that is a huge indicator that this idea can fly.
Absolutely. I think this is the most important part of the conversation. So with regard to the conversations you're having with other parties, SMEs, for example, or anyone that could benefit from the protocol, how is that actually going in real time? How do you get through your marketing strategy or through your PR or through any other means? How do you get current interest? How do you garner that interest in the mainstream sort of environment so that they can transition utilizing the protocol?
I think one of the strategies that we used at BigchainDB when we're working on the BigchainDB, the database, is the same strategy we're doing here. We are speaking and presenting in places where we know that there's going to be a lot of CIOs, decision makers, who are struggling with how do they manage this data? Is this the data that they want to keep in-house? And if they want to keep in-house, is it something they want to or are able to monetize? And so those are the types of discussions we're trying to have, and we've been having a lot more of them. So people are coming to us. We get quite a few kind of inquiries every week of saying, hey, I have this set of data. I'd like to monetize it. Let's have a discussion, and I can explain to you my problem. And then we come from our side and say, okay, does the marketplace toolkit, as well as the Ocean components, is there an angle that we can explain to them and educate them so that the Ocean network, as well as capabilities, become attractive for them?
Right, and clearly there is the demand. There is the demand there, Bruce, that you're mentioning, and that's what I wanted to check. Now, in doing that, obviously you have to have a presentation and a pitch with price systems and listings as well. Can you talk us through how organised you guys are with regard to the presentation of how you essentially charge for the services that you offer?
So there's kind of two ways that you can look at business models if we're going down this route. Number one is, given the vulgarities, the broad kind of problem sets that we could be tackling with every single client, probably at this stage, the best thing is to just offer them workshops to understand their need, to provide education, and then to start prototyping for them. And a lot of this stuff you could do on a consulting model, or you can do on a subscription model. We found that consulting is something that a lot of people are open to, and they're able to engage a lot faster, because it's just like, okay, we have some toolkits, you have a problem, let's see if we can't find a solution within 3 months, that type of thing. So that works. And then based on these engagements, the idea is that we can start building products on top of Ocean that could be software as a service, subscription-based, where then those are more scalable. And that's kind of the 1-2 approach that we're looking at. And right now, the main focus is just getting out there, understanding the problem, and then making sure that the Ocean toolkits and network can be constructed in a way to solve those problems, paid in consulting, and then based on that, we can build some additional tools on top that are value add.
Right, got it. So essentially, so you can become that one-stop shop first. It's interesting you say that, because some of the more prominent and ambitious protocols are also trying to make sure they have that integration service and that consultation as a starting point. You've built that in. Trent, I wanted to talk to you about some of the concerns, because one thing that was impressive in your information provided is that you address some of the concerns that you don't have answers for yet, and something that your team would be still openly discussing. Some of them were things like usability, even questions about whether or not incentives will fail in the future, questions about security. It's impressive that you are questioning these issues. Can you talk to us a bit more about the concerns the team has currently as you build this?
Sure. So overall, you know, there's the network backend where we have rolled out the V1 so far, which is the skeleton of the orchestration, as well as the decentralized access control. And of course, a network backend, you still need to have front ends for it that target the end users, whether it's people with data, people consuming data, et cetera, right? So we have a couple demonstrators in the front end already, which allow people to onboard and try out. There's Commons, Ocean Commons, which is at commons.oceanprotocol.com. Where people can use this. And in fact, we've gone way out of our way for usability there, and now even has burner wallet functionality, which is something pretty recent out of the Ethereum space. So you don't even need to hook it up to MetaMask or anything. You can use that if you want, but it's just really easy. Another demonstrator that we have is something called Manta Ray, where it's at datascience.oceanprotocol.com, and people go there and they can spin up a Jupyter notebook and play with Ocean there, and the Jupyter notebook itself is treated like a data asset in Ocean. So these are things that we have right now for people to help onboard, to understand how Ocean might be used, as well as to help them start imagining things that they might build. And so that's, of course, usability is concerned broadly in the blockchain space, but you know, we have some demonstrators to show that it can be quite usable. And as we build out more of the backend, V2, V3, et cetera, and front-end related functionality, then that should be helping more and more.
Right.
In terms of the incentive design itself, just to address that quickly, I mean, we will see as we roll it out, but if you approach engineering, you know, and I used to build CAD software to verify computer chip designs, right? And so 2 years ago, I wrote about this a lot, and a year and a half ago, about verifying and design, you know, token engineering, and where there was a real lack of tools for verifying tokenized designs. You know, smart contract audits and formal verification, that handles some of it, but it does not handle the dynamics. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to verify the dynamics. Some tools are starting to emerge, such as CAD out of block science, but there will be other tools and tactics that you can employ too. So one thing that we are doing to help minimize the risk as we roll out the tool is, rather than having 100% of the block reward curve roll out on day one when we launch the V3, which has the incentives, it's actually multiplied by simply 10%. And that way it puts less of the tokens at risk at first if people are gaming the system. And then as the system stabilizes, then that multiplier will go from 10% to 25 to 50 and finally 100% of the actual reward curve. And in doing this way, basically, you know, the best way to verify is a live system, right? Where the dynamics are in play, there's just less at risk. So this is one of the key aspects we're going to be, one of the key tools we're using to verify the system live and harden it.
And Trent, that also explains, that point you're making about we're yet to see whether or not this is going to be successful, but certainly, there is this very, very detailed plan that you've put out as you start to release this incrementally. Now, Bruce, I want to talk to you about something a little bit more challenging, perhaps, and that's with regard to the more macro assessment of crypto. We see manipulation rife, arguably. We see questionable conduct. Does it concern you at all that you are part of a system that's yet to really clarify, through regulation and compliant means exactly what the stance is of, even terminologically? And there's a lot involved in this question, I know, but does it concern you about some of the sort of malevolent the actions that seem to be playing out at the moment?
Great question, actually. I think that for Ocean's perspective, we've always taken the road of playing it clean, being fair, being transparent. And we are, card-carrying members of Mazari Registry for transparency. We have reported as much as we could to many other entities that have asked us. And we've eschewed some of the kind of more dodgy practices to manipulate price. And this is something that I stand by, and I think the community also stands by. And I think that it's also human nature when there is, in a sense, a new opportunity, a new technology, a lot of activity going on, there's money at stake, that, of course, there will be shysters, there'll be people who are defrauding others, and that, of course, is not pleasant to watch. We just try to stay as much as possible, being as transparent to the community and doing the right thing. That's the question I generally ask myself. Is this the right answer? Is this the right way to do it? That if we have to tell to the community later on, is that something that they would understand?
I appreciate that, because quite sincerely, I would argue also that the team's stance needs to reflect the beauty of the blockchain, which is transparency first and foremost. We just simply need more teams like yourselves to do that. And with regard to the team itself, either of you could comment, and hopefully you both do, on the team, on the strengths of your team, on the skill sets of your team specifically. I had a look. There's quite a few, 20 plus, perhaps there's more now, but many of them come with their own absolute skill set and unique experience. Do you have the right team? Are you building your team? And how is it going so far?
I think our team has got dozens of years, decades of experience in AI. We're one of the very first teams in the world working on blockchain. We have some experts on data. I think that the team is the right team. It's a rare opportunity to bring together talents like this together to solve this type of problem. And we're not alone also, because there's other teams in the world that we collaborate with. Because, I mean, no single team can have all the talents in the world. But I'm very proud of the team and what we've accomplished in essentially 1.5 years of developing. We had an independent security audit on our code, and the main quota there was, in the time that they've been given, it's almost unbelievable what they've delivered, and then the attention to detail and documentation and meeting the community needs is fantastic. That was kind of like the outcome of the audit report.
Right, and what about you, Trent? What would you like to add just quickly with regard to the team?
Well, yeah, I certainly echoes Bruce's statements and whatnot. And overall, we're building something that is at the intersection of AI and blockchain. So we're very fortunate to have a lot of expertise in the team on both facets, including people who have a lot of experience in both of these things, right? Which is actually quite rare. We've been in the blockchain space quite for 5-6 years already. Like Bruce mentioned, we were one of the very first teams doing anything in the space with IP on the blockchain, and then working on the big chain DB, which was data oriented towards blockchain. And so and now though we're able to loop back and draw on the tons of experience we have in the world of AI and pull that to basically solve these, like how I see it, it's solving problems that AI people have. AI people, they just are crying for data. They really need data, and there hasn't been great solutions presented in the AI space, but we saw that blockchain can address that. So having the team to help deliver on this, I'm very, very proud of the team that we have.
Sure, and guys, it's not easy to keep your team. You've mentioned, Trent, that you're a longitudinal project that started a few years ago. So to have your team go with you throughout the tribulations, the challenges, the trials that you've already gone through, I had a look at some of the things you've done, and we'll talk about that in the process. But kudos to you for keeping much of your team together. Now, with regard to your advisors, I want to talk about that because you have a lot of them, and you don't typically see this kind of number. One in particular I wanted to mention, that's Meltem Demirors, because obviously many know of her position in Congress. She's a international speaker for and proponent for blockchain more generally and cryptography. What's it mean to you to have the depth of these advisors, and particularly in the light of Meltem as well? How important is it to have someone like her as part of your team?
We're ecstatic over the advisors that we have and the quality, not only Meltem, but a whole bunch of others. What we saw when we were assembling an advisor team was that we needed people who were experts in AI, blockchain, data, and industry for go-to-market and such like that. And so we went out looking for these types of advisors. And because we've been in the space for a long time, it was relatively easy kind of conversation with them. And then, all the way for the last couple of years, Meltem, as well as quite a few other ones, people like Ryan Selkis and a whole bunch of others, have been helping us along with the technology in terms of the token design, in terms of kind of everything about the project. They've been giving us input along the way. And that type of insight, because they access some of the smartest people in the space,
right.
That type of insight allows us to see what's happening. And to allow us to stay focused on what we're building, but then get the insights that other people are seeing elsewhere.
Right, and I think you raise a very important point, and that is access to the broader network that is, the crypto sphere. There's a lot of assets that are people in that industry beyond the tech development of, what tends to become a very focused group that is the Ocean Protocol devs and engineers. So have you found value in the network that these advisors have brought? And if you have, what's some examples of the value they've brought?
I think, so many of the advisors are industry ones, and they've been funneling leads to us. And as we've been building up technology, we're getting to a stage where many of these leads can now be addressed again with their use cases, because we have kind of the toolkits and the software development kits. I think what really sticks out to me from the advisors is we brought on advisors that would tell us the truth and the honest truth. And so they've been very good about that. And I appreciate that. I want people to tell us if we're messing up, if we're doing something strategically wrong, and all this sort of stuff. And that's kind of the main area where I've been getting value, is that, people like Ryan Selkis or Meltem, they call out shitcoins very.
Yeah, they do. I've spoken to Ryan through text, right? And, they're very, very bold and very direct.
And so they have a very good, they have a very good bullshit meter. And so for us to have them on as advisors to us means a lot, because they're the first people we have to convince, and they'll call our bullshit if we have any. And then it goes out to the community, we publish it and such like that. So these are the types of people that you want to tell you the unvarnished truth.
They also have an educated view as well. They understand the ecosystem. They are also respected speakers, and highly regarded people in this environment as well. So, congratulations to be able to have them on board. They do, represent a lot of the voice for us as people in the space. But Trent, did you want to add anything to that as well?
Yeah, a couple other things. So there's sort of, we do have a phenomenal set of advisors, and as Bruce had pointed out, from many different sort of verticals and industries and so on. And even within blockchain space, we also have people who are leading thinkers to help us think about governance going forward, about technology strategy and so on. And they sort of have these visions of the future that are very rare. So a great example is Louis Quende, of Aragon, one of the most transparent projects in the space. So, so Louis has been very helpful in showing how we can be more transparent, how we can structure ourselves going forward, all of this. Or Simon too, with just how to think about incentives and the token engineering and so on. One other thing,
Simon Delouvrier.
Yeah, Simon Delouvrier, thank you. And in the AI space too, we have people who have been extremely helpful. We have Peter Wang, who's founder of Anaconda, which has more than 10 million users. It's sort of like the NPM for data and Python.
Right.
So he's been extremely helpful in helping us guide our strategy towards, serving these data scientists very well. Or Andy Mueller, also with scikit-learn, another very prominent AI project. So
right.
things like this, all
really
of the advisors across the board, that's just a sample.
Yeah, so you've really thought about the whole migration towards, application and real utility, and each of them have their key value prop for bringing forward a more successful outcome for you. With regard to some of those key points, we talked about the use cases more generally of regulated data, global data commons, as you mentioned. Made some allusions of key foci as well, such as with Moby and the self-driving car. Lots to be had, lots more to be seen as more announcements come in the future. But just moving back to pricing for a second, gentlemen. Firstly, I want to ask you, if I wanted to find out more, is there any documentation I can read? Because I couldn't find it easily with regard to understanding how you price your value. And also there's mention of fungible and non-fungible data in that context. Can you talk to me about that a little bit so I understand?
Yeah, so I'll start with the second first because it's a shorter answer. So fungible versus non-fungible data. I mean, at the heart of it, data is a set of bits, which of course can be copied. But the thing that you can actually make it fungible and non-fungible, because at the end of the day, you have an IP license to use that data or not, which is simply a business contract tuned towards it, right? And the heart of the support for that is simply IP law and copyright law specifically. So then you could say, if you want, I'm going to create 10 limited editions of this data set, and each limited edition I can sell. So that's sort of like a fungible version, right? Just like you could have an ERC20 coin around just that data set if you wanted, but you don't need ERC20, of course. Right. And that's an example of making the data set fungible. Or at the heart, though, the copyright itself, that goes with the owner, but you can have a single license, which then is non-fungible. But there's a lot of other varieties of things you can do too in terms of pricing. And this goes to your first question on pricing of data. There's a huge variety of ways to price data. Probably the most straightforward is simply a fixed price, right, for a given license to a data set. But that's actually often hard because, how do you connect that with the actual value that the data set is delivering, right? So the ideal way to price is where you actually can understand the value that is being created, and then it links back to the data set. So let's say you have this compute pipeline of, grab some data, clean it, build a model, use the model to predict something, and then make sales on that. And then imagine you're getting royalties on the sales. So overall, the creator of the AI model gets, say, 20% royalty, and of that, they're giving, say, half of the proceeds to the people with the data sets, right? Right. So with Ocean, then you have this pipeline that's in a smart contract that then links back to the data providers. And this is why we're really excited about Ocean from this perspective of these compute pipelines, these DAGs, because the providers of the data can get paid in sort of a royalty fashion for solving these problems. That's not there in the V1, but it's coming in the V2, et cetera, in more detail. I see. So that's royalty side pricing is incredibly powerful. Yeah. So in that context, gentlemen, can we expect more transparency, more, I guess, explication of the process of the pricing models as you start to make them clear? So actually, we have a series of blog posts that have been coming out from one of our people, Erwin Kuhn. So he published 2 blog posts. I'm not sure if the third is out yet, on all of the sort of different possible pricing models with Ocean. And so, people who want to run marketplaces, they can choose whatever pricing model they want and implement it, et cetera. And so then it's not about, Ocean Protocol Foundation, et cetera, being transparent. It's really just about the what does the data pricing look like, right? And there's a lot of other options too, variants of auctions and so on too. So a huge variety of possibilities. And some of them are actually only possible if you have a crypto setup like Ocean. So things that weren't possible in a Web 2.0 data marketplace become possible in a context like Ocean, such as this royalties setup that I just mentioned. Got it. Now, gentlemen, given that you are fundamentally protocol, but you want to sustain your position, I would imagine, well into the future, have you also made sure in this context of other parties also being able to engage in the marketplace that you can too, so that you can, for example, develop an application or do something so that you can sustain revenue and create revenue for your own, for the team to continue well into the future?
Yeah, so it's probably the right time to talk about Ocean Protocol Foundation. Ocean Protocol Foundation had taken the community funds in and dispersed to 2 of the founding partners, BigchainDB and DEX. The foundation cares for the community, the brand, and token distributions, etc. The companies, BigchainDB and DEX, have each been given kind of service contracts to build out different components of the network, as well as do business development. And both BigchainDB and DEX are responsible for setting up their own profit-making kind of sustainable businesses on top of Ocean, if they can. And so that's essentially what we're doing. So Ocean Protocol is not for profit. It's meant to go as broad as possible to the community, to get diversity, to get competition. And within that competition, BigchainDB and DEX will both be playing in the field.
Okay, well, that's pretty transparent. So you're a bit of both. You want to be agnostic, open source protocol, but you also want to make sure that there's built into your architecture and your roadmap, and hence the foundation. Now, with regard to the tokenized service layer, that's what you call it in your information. There's certain parts that are relevant, things like data storage, compute, algorithms, and then the staking and the licensing as well. Is there anything you wanted to add to that when we talk solely about this tokenized layer?
Well, I guess maybe the thing to add is that the Ocean token itself simply has many roles, right? So it has the role of being used as a unit of exchange for people to be buying and selling data. It has the role of staking if you want to earn revenue on a data set from network rewards. When network rewards are dispensed, those rewards are dispensed in Ocean tokens. And in the staking side too, basically there's staking for sort of back and forth challenge response dynamics. Like, let's say I serve a data set that or I claim to have served a data set that I actually didn't serve, then there's ways for people to challenge me. And if I really didn't serve it, then my stake would get slashed. So there's more complex dynamics there related to the token design as well. So basically there's a few different uses. Yeah.
Right, and I really want to talk on, sorry Bruce, I wanted to ask you, this is probably the most important question in the context of the token. Gentlemen, one of the things that we just don't see enough, in fact, I would argue that we almost never see it, and that there's a really clear correlation between the value of the token and the ecosystem growth, whether we call that token velocity or token economic velocity or some other term. There's a real dearth of this empirically. So have you really considered this deeply so that you can have this proof of value as a genuine utility token?
We've looked at multiple kind of models on how the utility token could potentially be valued. Now, given the sensitivity in certain jurisdictions with securities laws, we were asked not to publish those, unfortunately, because we did want to share that with the community so that they could kind of see and vet what we had been doing.
Right. And I appreciate, just to jump in there, I really appreciate you saying this, because one of the issues that comes across a lot is how do you explain from the outset when you're crowdfunding, for example, what the terminological meaning of the token is. So I use the term pre-utility because that's essentially what it's designed to do. So thank you for also acknowledging the question mark of security, but please continue because this is a really important topic.
Yeah, so even though our lawyers in 3 jurisdictions said that Ocean token was not a security, it was a utility token, and we had done analysis on the token velocity holdings, the emission schedule, everything. We used kind of some of the frameworks that Chris Berniske had originally set out. We were, he even kind of vetted a lot of what we had talked about. He said, it's plausible and all that sort of stuff. It came down to securities lawyers essentially saying, you shouldn't release this because then this should be done by an independent researcher like Moody's or S&P and all this sort of stuff. And this should not come from the team because then what it does is it could set expectations improperly. And so that's why we're so happy to have independent kind of researchers like Mazzari and recently BlockFire coming out talking about kind of the strengths and weaknesses of the project in a independent manner.
Right, and Trent, please add to this because you mentioned BlockFire and Mazzari. They are in that crypto sphere though, and I would love to see more analysis from outside even crypto when they explore the value of the token itself in the context of token velocity. Do you want to add more to really give us confidence that there's been a lot of research put into this to make sure there is this strong correlation of value?
Yeah, so overall, and I described some of the ways that Ocean token is used before, and then people can put this into whatever frameworks they like, right? One framework, for example, is one that many people worked on, but Kyle Samany from Multicoin Capital had a very nice piece describing sort of 4 different ways that you can model a token, from the lowest level, which is unit of exchange, then up to the burn and mint equilibrium, which is a bit more value, like Factom has, up to discount tokens, such as Binance has, up to work token, which is, for example, as Filecoin has. And so, you know, the lowest level is really sort of what Chris Bernitzky's analysis is, and it's really on unit of exchange tokens. But the highest level, the way that you value that is more around net present value, current cash flow or GDP of the economy for the current year, plus the future year, plus the future year at discount rates, according to the various things. So at the heart of it, actually, Ocean does have a work token dynamics, putting it at the very top, because you have to, in a work token, basically, you need to stake or pay in order to earn income in the system, and Ocean actually has that as part of its dynamics.
Right. So, gentlemen, can I ask, and this is a very tough question, do you have confidence that you have done this successfully, so that in the future we are going to see more evidence empirically of this connection, of this interconnection between the token and what you're building out? And the reason why I just should perhaps add a little, additional comment here is because to date, if we just looked at the performance of your token, we just, we couldn't see that reasonably yet.
It's a fair point. I think it's all starting right now. Many of the stuff that started with Chris Bernitzky all the way to Kyle Samany to a whole bunch of other people, we're trying to put models on here. It's all hypothesis. There's nothing that's set in stone.
Right.
I think the main focus that we have, what we've seen is there are people who said, okay, what have been the kind of the fees on the network using Bitcoin and Ethereum as kind of proxies? The more fees you have, that is a good sign of how much economic value is being traded. You could also say how much are people investing into the mining gear. Up until now, I don't know how many billion has been invested into mining to secure the network as well as energy. Those are other things. We don't know for utility and work tokens what the economic model is, but we have a good idea that a couple things are. It's clear that economic value traded over the network is going to be a huge indicator. If we can somehow get indicators on how much value is being transacted over the Ocean network as it grows, that's probably a good proxy. Second thing is the diversity of the services being offered. So if you get, let's say, the difference between 10 services and 1,000 services, you could say is maybe 100x. So these are the type of things that we're going for. So if we can get people working on the protocol and trading value, then those are essentially the 2 key levers. And then underneath that, you have number of transactions on the network, all that sort of stuff. But the main thing is, are people coming to the network? Like, for instance, Shopify has gone from 1 billion when it went public to 40 billion because they constantly have more people coming and building marketplaces. And what's the value that's being transacted over it? So let's say in Amazon, they transact X billion, 100 billion per year. That's probably a good proxy. We're still in the early stages. As technology improves and as we get kind of live production use cases, and as we grow the community, I think the signal has to start coming out, but I think we're still in early gates.
I think beautifully said, Bruce, because the signaling for many of the startups is just not there yet. I mean, you've been building this project for some time, or this startup. Now, with regard to looking at the past, obviously that's all we have, to really use that information to, pose these questions to the teams. You did the IEO, you've done, prior to that, you did the ICO. A lot of interesting, price movement happened throughout that process as well. I wanted to talk to you about the risks of VC dumping, the risks of conduct we often see that's questionable, whether that be from selling tokens, in the back end. All kinds of things happen. But the reality is, up to now, there has been a very, there's been a really questionable price movement with regard to a real spike in the price, and it's really dropped down, to be fair. So since February, essentially, it started to decline. Now, if you're starting to, do real business now, how can you sort of reflect on the past and explain all of that's happened since you ICO'd, or since you tried to?
I think since the IEO, what the team has done is 2 things. Number one is we don't influence the market. The market does what it does. We produce the information that as it comes out, as it's ready, and we let the market decide. That's the first thing. So just being transparent, not putting a hand on the lever, whether it's accelerate or decelerate in any way. The second thing, which is the more important thing, is we just put our heads down. We put our heads down to build the tech and refine the roadmap and make sure that we can keep our promises for V2 and V3, and then have an eye out for V4 or V5. We put our heads down in terms of building community and rejuvenating and getting it, more active. And then third, we do business development. So we're looking for the active customers. I think that is what the team expects. I think in the initial stages, when we had a negative price movement after the IEO and we got listed, there were a lot of calls for the team to put a hand on the wheel and to influence the price. And in hindsight, I am comfortable and confident that we did the right thing in not doing anything about the price and not doing anything hanky-panky.
Well, thank you so much.
But rather focusing on the things that would give long-term value.
Right. So that's the point I wanted to really get at, is that you didn't, participate in that kind of, as we mentioned before, that very negative conduct that we do see rife in the industry, despite the public pressure. Now, just to recap a few things, the IEO initially didn't work out so well. There was about double the price of the IEO. Then the IEO came out. You did that. Now the price has declined significantly. And recently, with regard to exchanges, you've started to emerge there. But very, very recently, there's been some anomalous action on exchanges themselves. You're not obviously part of that. You've made that clear. But why is it happening? Why are we seeing these unusual, movements in the marketplace because of listings on new exchanges?
I think many new exchanges are in a competition with themselves. And to get attention and eyeballs, a lot of these exchanges put in place certain watch trading, I'll just call it out, to jack up volumes, get attention for their exchange, and they just pick a token. I don't know if there's a reason why they pick something like Ocean or any other token. I think last week or earlier this week, there was one exchange that had unbelievable volumes of trading. It's coordinated by people that we have no contact with, and we don't know who they are, and we don't know why they do it. But I think that the community in our channels, from what we're seeing, they understand that, they see that, and they focus on the signal.
I see. Does it worry you, gentlemen, that it does happen, though, and beyond your control, when indeed many of the people participating in the ecosystem that is crypto do look at price and obviously here for not just technology, but also speculation, quite sincerely? So when these kind of anomalies happen that are external, do you worry about it at all, or are you still focused on what you're doing and just, move on?
I think the best thing is for us to focus on the long term and to focus on what we need to be doing. Just like with anything, like a publicly traded stock, there's always going to be adversarial environments where different people are trying to put different levers on the token price. Some people want the token price to go down because they've shorted it, or they want to buy it at a lower price. Other people want the token price to go up, which is the majority, by the way, because they get a gain on it.
Right.
We're happy to be part of this ecosystem, actually, because then we get to see all this dynamic. But as long as we focus on what's important to the project and long term, I'm comfortable with what happens.
Sure. Now, with regard to Runway, I want to just do a bit of a raise recap because obviously from the outset you had done the raise. Do you have enough capital to continue going? Can you just give us a bit of a rundown on what you raised and where you're at to now?
So in the IEO, we raised just under $8 million US. Most of that's been distributed already to the teams to deliver. We are definitely going to be able to roll out the phases that we want to. So from V2, 3, 4, and 5, that's what we're committing to do with the runway that we have. And then in parallel, we're ramping up business development so that we can be sustainable in the long term.
I see. And Bruce, I wanted to ask you another tough question. It's only because it happens a lot. Obviously, key VCs or key parties invested in your startup initially. Did you have very secure and transparent lockups for those parties, or have they since, according to lockup, potentially or been able to, move on from your project and sell your tokens?
So we had heard, as we were fundraising, of other projects experiencing kind of a departure of VCs after they had
yes, very common.
After the token had listed. So the way that we had handled that was a couple of things. Number one is we took in a lot of money in the pre-seed from private investors who are VCs. And what we did was we took their pledge, and then we generally, for most of them, we cut them by 75%, what they had pledged and what they actually got. In this way, what we did is we had a broad set of VCs that had holdings in Ocean. I think we had somewhere in the range of 30 different VCs, each getting a piece of Ocean. Now that we've listed, I'm guessing a few of them, maybe between 10 and 25% may have departed, but I think that the majority of the VCs who I've spoken to, they've said that they're holding on to Ocean. They believe it's a long-term hold. And as long as the team is delivering at the pace that we're delivering, they're very comfortable to keep holding. So from what we've seen, where the trading has happened is mostly people who bought in an ICO and IEO. That's where a lot of the volume is coming from. There's definitely some people coming from seed, some people from the pre-launch, etc. But the vast majority of trading has been happening from just the people who came in at the latest stage. And so from those dynamics, I think that we did as best as we could, and I'm comfortable with the fact that we brought in people early on who were very were behind the project and technology. And yes, there was probably a speculative aspect of it, but they're sticking around to see how the game plays out. And I'm very happy with that.
And Bruce, I really appreciate this, mate, because having been in the game a while as well, observing these patterns play out, what tends to happen clearly is that there's a bit of a decline in value just by default because of the circumstances of this experimental pre-utility phase. But what's exciting about what you're saying is that we're looking now through the lens of utility and very strong potential for that in the future for Ocean Protocol. And hence, my push in the questions about token economic modeling. So that's going to be important as you start to unfold in the next few years to see that correlation and also to see a different narrative with regard to technology and the potential of this being paramount to the speculative value of the digital asset itself. Are you confident that that transition is going to happen with all the things you're building?
I think so. I think that the entire blockchain space is maturing. We're seeing in the last few months, of course, the crypto markets itself being relatively flat, but I see that as a positive because now we're consolidating. We're letting the technology catch up or run ahead of the hype. Once that happens, and then we get more people coming into the space, then you can have that kind of moving together. So, we had technology moving way forward, and then the hype came. Draw back, then technology moves forward, then the hype, this is the way technology is going to go. But more and more, we're going to get people onboarded into this Web3 world. And I'm convinced that decentralized technologies is the next internet fully and combined with an intersection with AI, which itself is another kind of life-changing technology. I think Ocean is well positioned. Absolutely.
Now, gentlemen, with regard to the synchronized sort of listings feature, more credible exchanges. I mean, obviously there are some exchanges that you're not, there's no dialogue that you're having with them. Some of them are just listing before their own ends, as we've seen. But with regard to, for example, Coinbase and the like, some that have got, strong reputations, and also considering that regulation and compliance is still a conversation that's very serious right now. Are you confident that in the future you're going to see a marrying of Ocean Protocol or rather an alignment with good exchanges and top-down moves to make sure that you're supported through compliance and regulation?
Yeah, I think there's two ways to kind of answer that. Number one is our community is growing. It's vibrant. The channels are extremely positive. So thanks to all the community members who add those good vibes. I think that it's the community who's going to convince the reputable exchanges to list us. So the more the community can do to talk about Ocean, to encourage the exchanges to list reputable, serious projects, the better it is. And I think that secondly,
the power is in the people's hands.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we'll focus on the tech. You guys focus on making sure we're on reputable exchanges. Okay. I think that top down, we have done everything we could to stay within each jurisdiction's kind of laws on securities and to respect them. And I'm comfortable we've done as best as we could.
Right, and you've also mentioned that there is a plethora of fake volumes out there, and that's even more the reason why we want to push for that regulation and for more of this transparent approach to make sure that the good projects win out. Are you concerned right now there's just a lot of shitcoins? And I really do mean that term in a different way to the maximalists use it, because there is crypto crap. There's no question of it, but there's also other things other than BTC out there trying to do things. So once we move away that crap from the crypto environment, are you confident that we'll have a, more quality over quantity?
I think so. I think that the financial tools, the transparency, the community movement, everybody's getting smarter about crypto. We're starting to see signal being separated from noise. If I just can name a couple of excellent projects like Numer AI, Enigma, these are excellent projects with very low market caps right now. Potentially unjustified given the level of their technology maturity and such like that. So I think that, and then there's other projects which I won't name any of them that are way kind of out of proportion to where their technology is.
Right.
This is normal. I think that some teams are better at marketing than others. Other ones are better at technology. Hopefully we've struck the right balance.
Got it.
And on that point too,
sorry, go ahead, Brad.
And just as a quick example, there's teams that kept their heads down and just built really great technology, and then the market might have noticed them at some point. Probably my favorite examples are Chainlink and Cosmos. Those teams just built, and at some point the market noticed them. And so we see that if we just keep delivering value and building really great technology that people can use, solving real problems, that's our focus. And at some point the market will follow.
Absolutely. So infra first. It's all about building. It's all about making sure that platform, that ecosystem, that protocol, and that infrastructure is there with your very, very robust architecture. That's going to take more time in the future. Hopefully, gentlemen, we can have more interviews and have more discussions. But right now, just to finish off, firstly, I'd like to thank both of you, both Bruce and Trent, for your time as co-founders of Ocean Protocol. It's been a really long interview, but the reason is obviously so that people can have a very strong understanding of what you're trying to do. Is there anything either of you would like to say, as a final statement before we finish off?
I mean, from my side, I just like to thank you for taking the time. I'd like to thank the community also for talking about Ocean and playing fair, being kind with others. Everybody who comes into the community gets a welcome, a warm welcome from some of the community members. And we just appreciate everything you guys are doing for us.
Thanks very much for that.
I happily echoed Bruce's comments. It's at the end of the day, let's all be excellent to each other.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Gentlemen, thank you once again, and to all the community of Ocean, regardless of which you're in globally. Once again, the power is with the people as much as it is with the team. So if you'd like to know more, make sure you do engage with the team themselves. They're available through the different social media channels. I'll make sure the descriptions are in the information below. But just finally, for a bit of fun to finish off as well, gentlemen, bullish on blockchain, yes or no?
Absolutely.
Bullish on BTC, Bruce?
We've
yes
bet the
no?
last 6 years. Sorry, BCC?
BTC.
On blockchain? Yeah, I mean, we bet. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we bet the last 6 years of our life on decentralized tech, which includes Bitcoin, Ethereum, and many of the other players in the space. It's an all-in bet.
Got it. You actually stole the last question for both of you, and that is bullish on Web 3.0. Obviously, it's an exciting time, so the question's yes. The answer is yes, I'm sure.
Great. Thank you.
No worries. Well, guys, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And again, don't stop. Keep going. It's all about the tech. It's all about driving forward to make sure that we can see real teams translate everything that we've seen in theory to make it pragmatic, to make it practical, and to make it real so that business does hit the blockchain and we start to see the advantages of it. Keep going. Ocean Protocol is here for long term. If you want to know more, you just check the descriptions below. But thanks, Trent and Bruce, for your time.